It was a cold, silent dawn. A man called John, about 35 years old and living in the city of Louisiana, in New Orleans, was standing in the middle of the Sunshine Bridge, staring at the dark waters of the river below. He was at his limit, carrying a pain that seemed unbearable. The loss of his job, mounting debts, owing money to loan sharks, the breakdown of his marriage, the abandonment of his children, friends and family, and an overwhelming sense of worthlessness had brought him to this moment. On top of that, he had just discovered that his ex-wife had been cheating on him for years and that she was pregnant with someone else's child. Lucas felt that his life was worthless, that he was a burden to everyone. Lucas felt that he was at his wit's end and that the only thing left to do was to take his own life. The icy wind beat against his face as tears flowed, reflecting the despair that consumed his soul. Now imagine yourself in his shoes. How many times have you felt lost? How many times have you thought that no one could possibly understand what you're going through? How many times have you felt judged by everyone without knowing what was going on in your life? Lucas believed exactly that. As he stared into the abyss, he thought that no one would listen, that no one cared, and that it was the right time to end it all. Lucas believed that the pain of life would end the moment he threw himself off that bridge. But something extraordinary was about to happen that night. Lucas took a step forward, ready to end it all, but suddenly a calm, authoritative voice echoed behind him. "Lucas, why are you here?" He turned around startled and saw a man in all white, wearing a dress whiter than the clouds in the sky. His face, feet and hands shone so brightly that Lucas couldn't open his eyes. This man, while frightening Lucas, also made him feel comfortable with an indescribable presence. It was as if love and peace emanated from him. Lucas hesitated, wiped away his tears and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled slightly and replied, "I am Jesus." At that moment, Luke froze and believed he was delirious and seeing things, because Luke was an atheist and didn't believe in any religion. He believed in science. Luke didn't know if he was dreaming or if it was real, but something in that man's presence made his heart race in a way he hadn't felt for years. Jesus approached him calmly, as if there was nothing to fear, and spoke again, "Luke, your life is precious. Why do you think it is no longer valuable? And now I ask you, who are watching, how many times have you felt this way? How many times have you believed that you were too small, too insignificant, to make a difference in the world?" Lucas began to tell his story, talking about his failures, his mistakes, and his losses. He poured it all out, as if he had been holding on to that pain for years. Jesus listened attentively, without interrupting him. When Luke had finished, Jesus put his hand on his shoulder and said, "I know every tear you've shed, Luke. I was there in every moment of pain, even when you thought you were alone. Your story isn't over yet, and what you see as an endpoint is just a comma in the plan I have for you. And there's the rub, my friend. How many times have you thought everything was over, but something unexpected happened? Perhaps a phone call, a message, or even a simple hug that changed everything in your life. Have you ever stopped to think that God may be using the most difficult situations to shape something greater in you?" Lucas began to cry again, but this time his tears were not of despair, but of relief. He asked in a trembling voice, "But why? Why me, if I've only ever made mistakes? What virtue did I have that you should be here with me? I've lived a lifetime of mistakes and errors, and I'm not even worthy of breathing right now. What grace do I have for you, Jesus?" Jesus replied, "Because you are loved, Luke. I died for you, and I would do it as many times as necessary. No matter what you've done or what you've failed to do, my love for you has never changed and never will. I have plans for you, plans of hope and of a future." Now, imagine that. Imagine hearing those words when all seems lost. Imagine hearing Jesus telling you how immeasurable your value is. How would you react? Would you believe it? As Luke listened, something began to change inside him. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if an enormous weight was being lifted from his shoulders. Jesus then held out his hand and said, "Come on, Luke. Leave this burden here and trust me. There is so much ahead, so many people who need you. Your suffering can become a testimony and your pain can become hope for many others. And now I want you to think, how many times have you faced something that seemed impossible, but then realized that it made you stronger? Could it be that what you're going through now isn't exactly that? A phase, a test, something that will prepare you for something greater?" Luke finally took Jesus' hand and climbed down from the bridge. He felt a peace he had never experienced before. It wasn't as if all his problems had disappeared, but now he had something he hadn't had before: hope. And this is where you come in. Perhaps this story is a reminder that, no matter how deep you think you've fallen, there's always a hand outstretched, ready to lift you up. You are not alone, and you never have been. At the end of that night, Lucas began a new journey. He decided to seek help, reconnect with people who cared about him, and above all, trust in God's plan for his life. Lucas began to trust more in God and in the plans that were laid out for him. Little by little, his faith was re-established, his confidence grew stronger, doors began to open, and what had been sadness turned into joy. Lucas got a job as a packer in a supermarket and gradually stood out among the staff. After 6 months on the job, Lucas was promoted to a merchandise clerk and continued to excel, rising to the position of section manager at the supermarket. Everything Lucas was involved with, everything he touched, everything he talked about, prospered. Lucas stopped at his section, bowed his head, and began to cry because he couldn't believe that his life, which had previously seemed to have no way out, was now becoming a reference point in his work. Lucas thanked God for looking out for him on what could have been a tragic night. Lucas, previously drowning in debt, managed to put things right. He managed to buy his house and his car. His savings began to pay off. His connection with his family, children, and friends was restored. He learned to trust and be grateful. Lucas became an example of overcoming. His story inspired others not to give up, to look for hope even in the darkest moments. And now I ask you, if you had the opportunity to change someone's life like Jesus changed Luke's, would you do it? Would you reach out to those in need? If this message has touched your heart, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know what impact you can have on someone else's life. And remember, your story can also be transformed, just like Luke's. God hasn't finished writing yours yet. God hasn't finished writing his book yet. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this story and how it connects with your life.